So today we'll discuss about the data model aspect of MDG. Okay, so just a quick recap what we discussed in yesterday's session. So we discussed about the architecture overview of MDG. So where you will have a kind of all the different components of MDG. We discussed it very high level. So in that one of the important kind of component is the staging area. So this particular staging area, what it does is basically if at all you wanted to create any master data using MDG. So first the data gets staged into that particular the staging tables or temporary persistence area. And from there, after all the workflows, all the governance rules that we configured in the system. So once it go through all those things, finally, when the data gets actually pushed from that staging area to that particular your underlying Maramasi active area tables. Okay, so that is a basic difference when you are creating any master data using MDG layer, where you will have that staging area. Okay, so this is my MDG system. So where I have my ERP component. On top of that one, I have my MDG component. So this is my staging area. So whatever the master data that I create or I modify the master data. So that data, okay, in MDG. So this particular data gets stored into the staging area, and you will be having the actual ERP tables like Mara, all material master or plant related, or probably all that master data tables are available over here in ERP layer. So after all the workflow approval process and all that governance process, once the record, if the final approver decides that this data is good to go, then that is the time the data actually gets created into the ERP or actual master data tables. Okay, so that is where staging area is very important aspect. And whereas if you are creating any materials using MM01, or I mean to say without without MDG layer, if you are trying to create any master data using the respective standard transaction codes like MM01 or MM02, or else for customers or KNA1, or probably for vendors. So those respective transactions, if you are trying to create a master data using those respective transactions, that is where the data directly gets created into that master, the actual tables. Okay, so there is no concept called this staging the data and further enrich that particular master data, and then only for the finalized or only the reviewed records you have to move it to the underlying ERP table. So that kind of concept is not there if you are going through this creation of master data using the standard transactions. Whereas if you're creating the master data using MDG UI applications, so this staging area will come into picture, and from there all that data enrichment will happen, and then finally the data gets created into the actual master data tables. Okay.
Now
So
this is now sorry to interrupt. This is with a co-deployment. If it's a hub deployment, it will be slightly different, right?
in hub deployment also the concept remains same. Okay, so what happens is now the only difference is, assume that this is my co-deployment scenario. So in case of co-deployment scenario, this particular portion, the portion that I'm highlighting over here, okay, so in this particular portion I have all these tables, and the master data gets created from MDG into this particular one. And here itself, I'll create my transactional activities. Like I'll create the sales orders, purchase orders, or any invoice documents, or any transactional related activities I'll be performing in the same system. I mean, in this particular same layer. So here you are using this particular SAP. So at the end of the day, this is one SAP system. Okay. So I'm using this SAP system for my master data purpose, and also I'm using the same system for my transactional system activities as well. So both are happening in the same system in co-deployment. You are right. So now when it comes to hub scenario, how it look like? Okay, so let me. Okay, in case of hub scenario, what happens is the concept remains same. Let's say, for example, this is my SAP MDG system. I have my MDG layer here, and I have my ERP component over here. So the staging area is available over here, and here the actual ERP tables are there. So once the data gets created and gone through the data enrichment governance process, the data gets it's available over here. Now the only difference between this one and this one is here there is no transactional activities in this particular system. Okay, so here in this particular system there is no transactional activities in this particular system. Okay, now only in this particular ERP portion we will use the tables, or probably SAP MDG will use the tables related to the master data tables. If you look at any tables related to the sales orders or purchase orders or any the tables that are the for the transactional activities, there is no, because there are no transactions happening in the system, there is no, you don't find any entries into your those respective tables. Now that happens in a separate system. Let's say, for example, these are my SAP systems. These are my SAP systems where the transactional activities happens in these particular systems. Now what happens is, here also you have this master data, Mara, Marcy, and all those tables. Here also you have that one. Okay, so then what happens is, once the master data gets created, in this particular system, that's where the replication part will come into picture, and it will replicate the master data into the same copy of tables in another SAP system. So once the data once the master data is available in this particular two target systems, then the transaction activities can take place using that particular master data. The only difference here is you will have one single system to create your master data as well as the transactional. In case of hub scenario, this particular system will use only for master data creation, though you have the ERP layer, but we will only use this system for master data creation, and the transactional activities happen in this particular system. That is a difference. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay. Fine. So now the here always our discussion in MDG starts with this particular portion, that the database tables that we have in MDG layer. So this particular portion we need to look into in detail. Okay. So this particular area we call it as a data model. Okay. So because in ERP, whenever you install that ERP component, okay, by default, all those tables will come into picture. Your Mara, Masi, MBK, EMB, EW, LFA1, all those tables will come into picture. But this particular staging tables, it won't be available in any ERP system by default. Only when you activate MDG components, when you activate that MDG related the software in this particular system, that is the time system in the backend, these tables will get generated. Okay, so now these tables we call it as a staging tables. Okay, so in MDG, always we will have the staging tables. So we call this as my staging area. Okay, now these staging tables are SAP generates specific staging tables for specific master data objects. Okay, so you'll have one set of staging tables for material master, one set of staging tables for business partner, one set of staging tables for your finance objects. Even in the same way, you will have again one set of staging tables gets created for your article master, which is the another SAP out-of-box master data. Okay, and you'll also have one set of staging tables for EAM objects, that is for your equipment, functional location, bill of materials. So this we need to have a separate staging tables for every master data. Behind these staging tables, you will have underlying in your ECC or ERP layer, you will have your MM related, material master related tables, business partner related tables, customer related tables, the actual tables, like I'll say an example here, Mara, and here for BP, it will be but 000 is a table. So these are the standard tables that are already available. Okay, so the data gets stored into your staging tables, and then after at the time of the final approval, what happens is the record assume that this is my material master staging table, so the data will be moved from here to here. And similarly, assume that this is for business partner. After activation, the data will move from here to here. So likewise, for every master data on ERP side, you will have the standard out of box the tables, and from MDG point of view, you will have the staging tables corresponding to every master data. And once the request gets created, the data will be moved to underlying the specific ERP tables. Okay, so this is the concept of at very high level. Okay, now what happens? This is not a single table. For material master, it is not a single staging table. You will have some group of staging tables. Okay, similarly for BP, you will have group of staging tables. Okay, now those group of staging tables. Okay, so in my MDG system, so I have some collection of staging tables for material master. Okay, so those collection of staging tables, we call it as something called data model. Data model. Okay, so we need to create something called data model. Whether it is a if it is an out of box standard material master, this data model is already available. So we need to create when assume that if you are having a custom master data like plant master or company code or any master data, so then always the collection of staging tables will be represented with something called data model. So the data model represents your MDG staging area for a specific master data. Okay, so what are those data models? Okay, so these data models are already available for the standard objects. The name of the data model for material master, we call it as a MM. The name of the data model is MM. Similarly, the data model name for business partner, customer, and a vendor, the data model name is BP. Similarly, for finance objects, the data model name is OG. Similarly, for the data model name for article master is AR. Similarly, the data model name for EAM objects or plant maintenance or the Ethiopia specific objects for plant maintenance, we call it as a U1. Okay, so these are the out-of-box data models that are available, including SAP partner data models as well. Now, this data model, each data model, if you go in detail, one level down, it will have something called some collection of tables. So what are those tables? In MM, you will have one staging table to store your material basic information, and you will have one staging table to store your plant related information. Likewise, you'll have different staging tables. Okay, similarly for BP, OG, and all other master data objects also. Okay, so in MDG, data model is the first most component to start with any, if at all you wanted to create probably using the custom object framework, you wanted to create your own master data object using MDG. So first we need to design the data model over here, because for these objects, data models are already available, staging tables are already there. The only scenario you come and work on these data models is if at all you need to add some custom attributes. That means extending the out of box of these solutions to include customer specific attributes. But for example, if at all I wanted to create my own master data, then there is no data model. I need to create my own data model. Which means I need to create my own staging tables as well. Okay, so in MDG, we don't create directly the staging tables. Okay, for the custom objects, we do some kind of design in terms of data model. And once you activate the data model, in the backend system automatically generates the staging tables. So usually if at all you have to create a table in SAP, we go to the transaction code SC11. We'll get into SAP system, and you go to SC11 is the transaction code where you create a table, and here you can create some Z table or anything. For standard, you will have something called Mara table, which is the basic table which stores the basic general information of your material master. In the same way, for plant and everything, all the tables are available. So first your staging table is also nothing but your this SAP database table only, but we don't directly create that staging table. Instead of that one, we actually design something called data model. And once you do that data model design, and then once you activate the data model, that is the time in the backend system, your MDG framework automatically generates the corresponding staging tables. Okay, so now before going into the data model topic, okay, we have something called okay, so this is the master data overview out of box. Okay, so in the data model topic, okay, so something we have before getting into the system, there is one important concept over here for the data models. Okay, so what is that thing? There is something called reuse versus flex model. Okay, so reuse versus flex model. What does reuse and flex data models? Okay, so let's understand this reuse concept versus flex concept, and then we will get into the system and we'll see how the MDG UIs look like. Okay, so we are talking about reuse. Okay, so reuse. So what does this reuse means? What are the concept that we just learned about the staging area? That is exactly the definition of your reuse mode. That means this is my MDG system. Okay, so I have my underlying ERP component. On top of that one, I activated my MDG related components. So system generated one data model, the staging area for my material master object. And here I have the ERP related tables for my material master, like Mara table. I'm just taking example of Mara table. So likewise, I have some collection of tables over here, which will store the data. So what I said earlier was, user will log into MDG system. He will actually open a material creation UI application. He will enter the data. Once he enters the data, then what happens is the data gets stored into this particular staging table. That record gets inserted into the staging table. Now on this staging record, it will go for the workflow process. Like it depends on the process that you define for that particular material, whether it is one level approval or two level approval or auto approval, parallel approval, and all the data enrichments, all the deduplication logic, and all the standardization processes. So that we will be discussing all these governance processes. After all those processes, finally what happens is, once the everything is fine, so the steward or someone will actually approve that or finalize that particular record, so that the data will be actually moved to underlying Mara-Masi tables, the ERP tables. Okay, so that means this process, this particular concept, we call it as a reuse mode. So for whatever we learned, so this concept we call it as a reuse mode. Why I'm saying it is a reuse mode? Because this is my here I'm using this particular ERP tables, the underlying Mara-Masi tables, to store permanently my master data, because this is a temporary area. So this particular staging, this is a temporary area until the record gets approved. The data will be there in the staging table, but this is my permanent area. So what happens is, here we are reusing this particular the ERP underlying ERP tables. These tables we are reusing to store your the master data. So that's why this particular concept we call it as a reuse mode. So once the data gets created into this particular ERP layer, okay, after activating this particular record, then what happens is you will have a normal your target systems. Okay, so as soon as the data gets created, inserted into these master data tables, then you also have your Mara table, Mara or the database master database tables over here as well. Okay, so what happens once the data is available in my MDG system, the Mara table of MDG system, after that the data will be replicated to or distributed to this particular respect to target systems. Okay, so actually I need the master data in these particular systems because I want my actual transactional activities are happening over here. Okay, so now I'm using this the underlying ERP layer or ERP tables to store that particular master data, and I can replicate to that particular target systems. So, okay. So whether some materials might be available here, some materials might be available over here, but I will have the consolidated view of all the master data in this particular system. Okay. So we are reusing these tables to store permanently our master data. So that's why we call this as a reuse mode. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. So now let's go to the other one, flex mode. Okay. So what happens in case of flex mode? Okay. So in case of flex mode, what happens is you have your SAP MDG system. Okay. So ERP component and MDG component. I have my staging table over here, the actual the master data tables over here. Okay. So as I said earlier, user will log into MDG system. He will maintain the data and he submits that request. The data gets stored into my staging table. Now, after this, after all the approval process, everything is done. We are talking about the flex mode. Okay. So after all the approvals, unlike your reuse mode, the data, I mean, the staging record, we call it as an inactive record, and the data that stores that is available after all the approval process, that we call it as an active record. Okay. So that means what happens is after all the approval process, unlike your reuse mode, the data still remains there in my staging table only. Okay. This is again another approach. The data will be available in staging tables only. So I don't want it to move the master data as soon as it gets approved into the underlying ERP tables. Let that record will continue to be there in my staging table only. Okay. So this is again another approach. We use this approach for certain cases. I will give some examples. Okay, but the difference between reuse and flex mode is, in case of reuse, once the approver or final approver approves that record, the data automatically moves to your underlying ERP table. We no need to write any logic. The standard MDG framework will take care of that. If that particular data model is a reuse data model, if you create the data model, okay, as a reuse data model, then automatically MDG framework will ensure that it will move the data from your staging area to underlying ERP. Whereas if you are creating a data model as a flex data model, that means in this flex data model, what happens is your staging area is flexible enough to store your inactive record. Also, after activating that record, it will also store that active record. That means your inactive record will turn to active record, but it will continue to stay in your the staging table only. So that's where we call it as a flex mode. Whereas in reuse mode, the data will be removed from your staging table and it will get stored into your ERP, or we call it as this one we call it as an active area. So this we call it as an active area. So the data gets stored into your active area in case of reuse mode. Automatically, in case of flex mode, your staging, the inactive record will turn to active record and it will stay in the same staging table only. Okay, so these are the two approaches. When you are creating any data model in MDG, you need to always think that, okay, whether this particular data model I need to design using reuse approach, reuse mode, or else using flex mode. Okay, so reuse is the data will be pushed to your underlying ERP tables. Flex means your active record will be there in your staging table only. Now the question is, okay, so if it is available in my staging table, then how the data will be replicated? Because ultimately you are using this MDG to create the master data. That is not enough. We need this particular master data in the target systems. So this is my target system 1 and this is my target system 2. So I need the master data in this particular target systems. I have the database tables over here. Okay. So as we discussed in case of reuse mode, there is something called replication framework. So we need to do that configuration for the replication framework. But what happens in case of reflex mode, the replication happens from here. So because your active record is there in your staging table. So MDG framework will read that active record and it will replicate that active record to the target systems. So that means by default, you don't get that active record into your ERP layer. Okay, so then, but always it is recommended, okay, it's an optional thing, but it is best practice, or it's recommended to also configure another self-replication in the sense, I can actually, how I am doing this configuration for the target systems, in the same way I will also do that. I will also do that self-replication, so that what happens is the data will be available also in my active area. So this is an additional configuration that is required if you are, so rest everything remains same in case of your reuse or flex. The only difference is in case of reuse mode, this happens automatically and your replication starts from here. But in case of flex data model, you need an additional replication to replicate the master data from your staging table to underlying ERP tables. Okay. So is this clear, the difference between flex versus reuse mode?
Yeah, it's a clear, but I have one question here. Okay, so you said like when we enter the data in MDG, right? Okay, so data is stored as a like inactive mode, right? Okay, so how it's activated and means, okay, what we have to do the activity data to import the data in the transactional system of like T1 and T2.
Okay, so you have something called data replication framework. So DRF is a one configuration. There we will be discussing how I can actually replicate the master data from MDG to the target systems.
Okay.
Okay, so here we will be exclusively discussing about integrating to your MDG system with the target systems, how to configure to replicate the master data. Okay, so once you do that configuration, MDG framework will automatically initiates this. It calls this replication framework once the final approval is done on that record. Okay.
Okay, what do you mean by the final approval? Okay, this is like the approval from the business side, okay, to initiate the process, or we have the approval process in the system. Okay, so we have to approve, then it will initiate the data. Yeah.
So I'll explain that concept. Okay, so what is that final approval concept? I'll just explain. So, but did you understand that reuse and flex concept?
Yes.
Okay.
Very well.
Yeah. Now coming back to in MDG, how it works exactly. Okay. So the replication, what point of time, what do you mean by this final approval and all those things? Let me just explain in a simpler way. Okay. So, okay. So you have something called requester. Okay. Requester means any person who is actually associated with this master data creation. So a requester will be there. So what requester will do? Okay, so let me also show you. Okay, once this is done, I'll show you in the system. So this is a kind of requester. He will log into MDG system and he will enter the master data. He'll open that UI application. He will enter some data. And once from his side, he is done everything. What he will do is he will submit that request. Once he submit this request, assume that we have another step. Okay, so where the data the submitted request will be come to this particular group. Let's say, for example, we can call him as an approver step. Okay, so that request will come to approver, and when approver opens his inbox, okay, and he will look at this again, you'll have group of people. So this approver will open that request, okay, and he will review the data entered by the previous requester, and if there are any changes are required, he will correct the data, okay, and he can actually approve from his side. He approved that request. So once he approves this request, and it goes to, again, I assume that I have another step. This is a steward step. Steward. Okay. So again, here you will have some group of people. And this steward, what he will do is he will review the data again. And if he feels that everything is fine, he will also done from his side. He will say, okay, approve. He'll also approve from his side. Then that is after that, MDG framework will initiate something called activation step, activation process. What does this activation process will do is, this activation process will read the data. Till now, the data is available in my staging tables only. So this activation process will read the data from your staging table, and it will try, depends on your reuse mode versus flex mode. Assume that this is a reuse mode. So then what happens? If it is a reuse mode, it will read the data from the staging table and it will insert the data into your ERP tables. So that will be done by this particular activation step. So this is programmatically happens by the MDG framework. Now this activation step usually will come, we will configure when you are designing your MDG workflows. Now what happens is, this is the last step we configure, always the activation step. So once you configure this whenever you call this activation step, that is the time your data will be read from the staging tables and it will push to your underlying the ERP tables. Okay, so once I call this activation step, that then the data will, after successful completion of this my activation step, what happens, the data will be removed from the staging table and it is already available in my Mara-Marcy table. And then your replication framework will start and it will try to distribute the master data. But technically my workflow is completed at this step because the data is already created in my underlying Mara tables. So my workflow is completed over here. So this is the process. Now here, before calling this activation step, I am having two review processes. Assume that you have another scenario where requester will log in, he will submit the data, and business said that I want only one level approval. Then what we will do? We will add only one approver step. Okay. And after once the approver approves that record, then here I'll call the activation step here itself. So that when I call this activation step here, this is like one level approval process. So that the data will be read from the staging table and it will try to insert the data into my underlying ERP tables. And once the activation process is completed, then my workflow is completed. This is one process. I will have another. So these are the different processes. This is process 1. This is process 2. And another one, assume that I have one more process. Requester will log in and he will enter the data, and there is no review process, approve process in this case. Business says that, okay, for these kind of materials, whenever requester log in and enter some data, so we don't want any approval process. That means once the requester submits, it should automatically get approved or activated. In this case, what I will do, I'll call the activation step at this one. I don't actually add any approval step. I'll just simply call the activation step. Now again, my workflow will be completed over here. Okay, so this particular activation step is the final step technically. So from the end user point of view, what happens? End user point of view, you can see only requester. Okay, from end user point of view, you will have only requester step, approver step, and you will have only the steward step. But in the backend technical, I need to configure this activation step. So that this activation step, what it will do, it will read the data from staging and it will insert into that active area. Okay, so whether it's a one level approval, 2 level approval, or it can be parallel approvals also, parallel approvals. So ultimately, after all those things, if I'm moving ahead by approving one after other, finally, this is the activation step where I will actually activate that record, or actually I'll create that record in my ERP tables. Is this clear?
Yes, okay, it's clear. Just a question here. Miss, okay, you said, suppose, okay, based on the business scenario, right? Okay, it may be like one approver views, or maybe two approver views, or maybe direct, direct, okay, it can be activated and go to the workflow, right? Okay, so if suppose approver is receive the request, right? Okay, from the requester. So in that case, how the approver will make sure that all the information is correct? Okay, say I take an example of a supplier, right? Okay, I have received an invoice. Okay, but okay, this is a new supplier. Okay, for my company, right? Okay, so requester is enter all the details. Okay, whatever supplier details like vendor name, vendor address, payment method, and even the EFT bank details also, right? Okay, but this all this invoice, okay, having with the requester, okay, not with the approver. Then how the approver will make sure these all the data is correct? Okay, name and address, okay, it's fine. Okay, suppose, okay, the bank account detail of the supplier, okay, it's linked with the MDG data also, right? Okay, so in that case, okay, means how the approver will make sure the information is correct.
So there, here we are talking about three type of validations. Okay, so one is in this example, what happens? Let's say, for example, requester, he'll enter the data like his address data and bank details. So because requester along with his name and bank data, and with which company code he wants to do business, what is the purchasing organization he wants to do that particular business. So all that information will be entered by requester. Then when it comes to approver, okay, first thing is this address data. Of course, you can have some additional checks by integrating some external address validate address standardization microservices or anything. Okay, so you can actually validate with the address by using some external sources. Okay, so that will be systematic check, where I will configure in such a way that at approver step, whatever the address data it is already available, okay, I will actually make a call to the external system and validate the data. And if the address, if there is any change in the address, it will propose that to that approver that, okay, so based on this particular thing, when I connected to this microservices, so this is the address. So which address you wanted to choose? Because when you connect to these microservices, it will give including your coordinates and geographical coordinates and everything, accurate address. I might be entering road number 10 and probably some XYZ street. Okay, but in that road number, the requester might enter only road number 10 and XYZ street. But in that road number 10, you might see some 10 houses. So which house you need to maintain? So that level of accuracy, when it connect to that microservices, it will propose that 10 addresses, everything remains same, with the house number is different. Then that is the time actually either approver, he will make a call to the request, or he will connect with that supplier, some offline process. They need help from that requester to provide that right house number and all those details. Otherwise, the approver will reject that request. He can also reject that requester, where it will go to the requester and requester will make a call to that the supplier, and he will get the correct address and he'll enter that address and he will resubmit that request again back to him. Okay, so here we are talking about two type of checks. One is the requester has to enter the right information, and that information we will programmatically we will connect to some external systems in case if it is required, and we will do that the validations or the checks or the data enrichment using this approach. Okay, programmatically we'll do certain checks will be done by programmatically. Few things has to be maintained by the requester. Now the third one is basically approver. The reason we are saying this particular person is approver, because he is an expert in this particular, probably a particular company code or particular plant location. He is the expert. Okay, so what payment terms we should derive for this particular supplier depends on the business that he is doing. What payment terms we need to enter. So this will be agreed upon between the supplier and the business. Payment terms, okay, these are the payment terms. Okay, what is the ABC indicator, or probably what is the cost center we have to use, what is the profit center we have to use. So these values, basically we will do some systematic derivations in the backend. Okay, if the request is for company code 1000, always you use this cost center CC01. Okay, and profit center is PC01. If the request is for 2000 company code, then that it will be always CC02 or PC02. Okay, so these are the rules that we set up in the backend. Then what happens? Whoever actually creates a request and extends that request to particular 1000 company code, automatically this data gets updated at in the UI. Okay, the profits cost center and profit center. Now approver also should be aware of that information. He will just validate the data. That is the reason we are calling him as an approver, because he is an expert in that particular area, so that he can validate the data. So one is certain rules will be like these kind of derivations we will set up in the backend. Okay, so we will configure the system in such a way that a few checks, few derivations we run in the backend. Okay, and few things has to be entered by the responsibility should be lies with the supplier or with that actual person. Okay, and the third thing is where the approver are stewards. Because we are calling them as an approvers or stewards, so that means they should aware of all this information, and they should be able to identify which is right information and which is wrong information. Does it answer your question?
Yes, yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, fine. Okay, so now whenever I say in MDG, okay, so let's say for example in my MDG system, this is the ERP and this is my MDG component. So whenever I say this data gets actually activated, okay, so and that time it moves from here to here, that means you will have all your workflows like requester step, then you will have approver step. Okay, finally only when you reach to that activation, we configure activation step as the final step technically in the backend. That's where the data will be moved from here to here. Okay, so now at what point of time I'm configuring this work activation step, that is depends on the workflow that I'm going to design, whether it is a 1-level approval, 2-level approval, or auto approval. So based on that one, I will call this activation step. Okay, so we will be discussing these points in the workflow topic. When we reach to the workflow topic, that time we will be discussing how to configure these steps and how to call this activation step, what happens exactly at the activation step. So we will discuss all those points in our workflow topic. Okay, now just for your visualization purpose, let's have a look at how these MDG UIs look like. Okay, so if I go to NWBC, I'm going to NWBC. Okay, so NWBC is a launch pad where you can actually, if you look at, you can access the UIs. Okay, you can see here in that architectural diagram, there is something called, this is NetWeaver Business Client. This one we call it as a NWBC, NetWeaver Business Client. Okay, so there are other apps are also there where you can access using SAP Fury apps also. Okay, but let's learn about NWBC apps, because 90% of the stuff revolves around this NWBC apps only, and these are the Fury apps that are evolving recently, and we will look at very limited information we can actually maintain using Fury apps. Okay, but if at all you wanted to create a full-blown material with all the information, usually we go with this NWBC apps only. Okay, to access your master data or anything. Okay, so when you okay, so first thing is always we'll go to NWBC. The transaction code is NWBC. Enter NWBC, and if you usually in your project systems, it will go to directly to that NWBC homepage. Now, whatever you can see here, all these are the different roles. Okay, roles in the sense of there are certain business partner related roles are there. Then you can see here for customer related roles are there, and business. Then you will have something called MDG finance related roles are also there, and you will also have something called material master related roles are also there, different roles. So these are the out of box roles that we get, like requester role will be there, you will have specialist role, you will have default data steward role, so admin role. So these are the, we will talk about all these roles little later. Okay, now the home page for your business partner, I'm just going to the business partner home page, SAP MDG BP menu. Okay, so once you go to this particular BP menu page, this is your home page for your business partner. Usually we create a business partners using the transaction code in the ECC. The transaction code is BP. When I go to BP transaction code, so this is my BP transaction code. This is my the SAP GUI based transaction code where I'll create a business partner over here. Okay, if at all I wanted to create a business partner as an organization, you can select here, you have option BP as an organization, person or group. So this is a place you will enter okay, business partner name, address, data, then all these different views you will maintain specific to business partner. This is your SAP the standard ERP based application. Okay, but when it goes to MDG, so this is a home page, one stop for all your activities related to business partners. What are the things that we can do? I can search for a business partner. Okay, and all these are the search applications. And if this is for your to perform mass operations on business partners, you can perform mass operations over here. So there are multiple links are there over here. Okay, and you can find your inbox. So this is my change request inbox, or probably you can look at the change documents, change history of the business partners. You wanted to search for a particular business partner, what are the changes for this business partner has gone till today. Okay, so this is the change document related information you can fetch over here for every business partner, right from the creation till today, how many changes it has gone through, and who changed, when, what changes he has done. So all those information will be available in MDG. Okay, so all that information is available. Okay, so you can access all the change history of the particular business partners over here, and there are certain analytical reports are also there, out of box analytical reports. So this particular section talks about the analytical reports. When I say analytical report means all your workflow processes. Okay, whether it met SLA, how many partners created in last 1 week or last 1 month, how many of them are approved, met SLA, how many of them are not met SLA. While you are creating a master data along with the workflows, you will also associate some SLAs. Okay, so this is a high priority request and it has to be approved and completed within a 1 day. This is a medium priority, it has to complete within 2 days or 3 days. So when you define certain SLAs for every workflow processes, you can actually extract this here from here, that how many of them met SLA, not met SLA, and all those things. Okay, you can analyze this one. And also this talks about your data replication again. So this complete configuration talks about how you wanted to replicate the master data from one system to other system. You wanted to do an ad hoc replications. Once you approve that request and activation is done, then you saw that that data is not yet moved to the target system, so due to certain reasons, then you need to do an ad hoc replication over here. So all those the tools that are related for your replication process are available over here. Okay, and data transfer is again this is just loading the data into your MDG system. Bulk loads you wanted to do into MDG system, or you wanted to export something from MDG system, there are certain apps are also available over, tools are also available over here. And it shows you on the right hand side, change request is kind of a concept we will discuss a little later, but this is tightly associated with your master data creation or change process. Okay, how many requests you approved and how many requests you rejected, how many of them are still pending in your, how many of your requests are still not yet approved. So you'll see the complete information over here. And in the down, it is with your participation. You as an approver, or you as an requester, or you as an steward, how many of them are there. So this is with your participation, and this is with how many you created on your own. Okay, so you can see all those information. And on the left hand side also, you see some kind of the same information is available on the left hand side as well. Okay, so now if at all I wanted to create a business partner, okay, so I don't find that create business partner link directly over here, because as per MDG, the MDG principles always says that before creation of any master data, you should look for that data if it is already available or not. Okay, so that's why SAP intentionally didn't add a link over here that create business partner or something. Only they provided an option to search for a business partner. Okay, but that means it makes mandatory that you need to go to this link at least. Okay, so I'll access this link. I'll click that link. It will take me to that search business partner. So you will get a search application over here. Just taking some time. Yeah, so this is your search application. So this search application exclusively defined for business partner. Okay, now in this application divided into two parts. The top part, till you can see here, this particular top part is your search criteria. On based on what conditions, what is your search parameters? Okay, I wanted to search a business partner based on certain search terms or name one, name two, or probably I wanted to, if I know the business partner number directly, I can enter the business partner number over here. So I provide my criteria, and you can see here very limited attributes, but this can be actually, you can actually add more attributes over here. Okay, so search applications is one of the topic that we are going to discuss later in this course. Okay, so that time we will discuss in detail, but you can see based on certain parameters, but it is not limiting to only these parameters. You can add more parameters also over here, either the standard parameters or your custom parameters also you can add over here to search your business partners. So based on certain parameters, once I enter my criteria over here, and when I click that search button, this is the time system will go and check the data from the database tables, and it will show me all the available business partners depends on my criteria over here. Okay, so now whatever the business partner I'm trying to create, so assume that I will enter some partner name or something, and I'll try to search that one. Okay, so if I find that partner that I'm looking, well and good, I no need to create. If I don't find that partner, then from this search application, I will get an option to create a new partner. You see here, you can create a new business partner as an organization, as a person, or as a group. So I can create a new business partner from here. So they have provided that link over here, so that at least they'll make it mandatory to navigate to the search application, whether you search it or not, but you'll have that option over here to create a business partner. You can click on this particular option. So it will ask something called change request type. We will discuss about the change request type later. Okay, so I choose one CR type, and if I go further down, this is my BP creation screen. Similarly, the BP transaction code, when I enter that BP transaction code, what are the information that I can maintain using that? The same information I can also maintain using MDG UI applications. So it will take me to that MDG UI application where I can maintain all the business partner data over here. So now you can see your business partner data, your partner numbers. You can maintain the partner, business partner group name, then its search terms or business partner type. The address related information you can see here. I can maintain the business partner address related information. Then if it is an organization related data, you can maintain all multiple addresses as well over here for the partner. Okay, you can create whatever. This particular one is a default address, but it will allow you to add more addresses for the partner. You can maintain the partner bank related information, bank country, bank key, bank name, all those information you can maintain over here. And the tax related information you can maintain over here. So all this information is you already have in your BPT code. If I go to BPT code, you can see here you have that identification control. All this information is already available over here. So the same information also available in terms of, this is a SAP GUI based transaction to create a business partner. This is MDG web based UI to create a business partner. Okay, so once I enter all this data, what I will do is I'll submit this request. Once I submit this request, assume that if I configure some workflow in the backend, that's where the workflow will come into picture, and it will actually submit, depends on the workflow. If you configured any approver in the workflow process, it will, this request will be submitted to that approver. And from there, it will go to the next level, depends on all those options. And finally, the final approver approves. Then that is the time where we backend programmatically we add an activation step, and that activation step, it reached the activation step, and at the time of activation step, it will read the data from the staging table, and it will actually create into my ERP table. So that's how the master data gets created. Okay, so now any questions on this?
Yes, actually, I have one question. This was how do you identify if this is a, because BP means a customer or vendor, right? How do you, in the UI, how do you differentiate if this is for a customer or if this is for a vendor?
So yeah, it is your depends on the configuration. What happens is we do that configuration. Let's say, for example, BP grouping. Okay, so you do that is basically from your CVI configuration, customer vendor integration configuration come into picture. Okay, so that means depends on the BP group I select over here. Corresponding to this one in the backend, I will configure. Okay, for this particular business partner, this is the vendor account group or vendor group. So system automatically, once this record gets activated, system also in the backend, it creates a vendor. Okay, and the vendor will have the same address that I maintained over here, and their vendor will get the same bank data that I maintained. So all this information will be translated into the vendor related information as well. So when you create a business partner, technically in the backend, it creates two objects, one business partner, another as a vendor. Okay, and here itself you can also create vendor. You can see here something called relationship. Okay, in the relationship, I can create a new partner, or I can add a new partner or a new vendor or anything. I can also create over here. Okay.
Okay.
So here, sorry, not this one relation. This is the one roles. That the role. Okay, when if you add this particular role, it also creates in the backend vendor. I can also add a role specific to customer related role as well. Let me. Okay, so.
Okay, so the BP role determines whether it's a customer or vendor.
Exactly.
In how it's configured in the backend. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. That's true. So now see here, I can also create. So one BP can have one vendor and a customer also.
Okay.
So now once I add this one, you see here, I can actually go and once I complete all fix all these errors, right? So then from here I can navigate to the vendor page, and I'll maintain all the company code purchasing or as well. Okay, so we'll see that the demo in the system, but from here itself we can create a business partner and a vendor, customer, everything.
Okay.
Okay, so fine. We will go through this each and every object a little later. Okay, so at very high level, so you'll have similar kind of home pages for all masters, for material master, even for finance also. Okay, so this talks about your the master data search application, and when you go to the search application, it's not only you can search and you can actually create a new master data. You can perform lot many activities from the search application. So that is one stop for all your activities. Usually these search applications are equipped with all those kind of functionalities that you can, operations that you can perform on this master data. Okay, either I can create a new master, or I'll select this particular business partner and I can block this business partner, or else I can actually mark for delete this business partner, or else from here itself I can actually look at whether this business partner is replicated or not. So I can look at the status, and if at all I wanted to replicate on ad hoc basis, I can also do that replication from here. Okay, I can also copy this business partner. Okay, if at all I wanted to look at this particular business partner information, you can just click, this is your business partner number, just click this hyperlink. It will open up in a window where you can actually see the details of this business partner. It's a display mode. Okay, so you can look at the business partner. It's in display mode, the complete information of the partner. So this particular business partner also linked with some vendor. Okay, so it also has a particular vendor, and then the vendor address data, bank information. There's no bank maintained. You can create a new bank. You can maintain the bank information. So likewise, you can actually look at that complete information of the business partner. Okay, so you can actually, whatever the operations or activities usually you perform in the ERP for a specific business partner, so you can do all those activities from here itself. Okay, now let's also have a look at the material master homepage similarly. Okay, for that one also, always go to NWBC. Okay, go to NWBC. This time I will select material master related the role. Okay, so it will be menu 06. Okay, so we'll talk about these rows later. Okay, so now you can just focus. This is the home page for your material master. So it's the same thing, the same look and feel over here. Okay, if you look at if you remember that in one of that discussion in MDG introduction topic, we discussed about one of the important point here, consistency. Consistency means whether it's a business partner, material master, the home pages look like same, the UIs look like same, the approach look like same, everything. Only you will have the application object specific data will differ. Now here also it's the same thing. You have some such applications for material master. Of course, SAP provided directly creation of a material here itself. If I click on this one, it will take me to material creation screen, or else I can change an existing material, or I can perform mark for delete an existing material. But these links are not actually mandatory here. All these operations you can also do from such application. If I go to such material, okay, so again the same thing, like you have your search criteria and you also have your results. So based on, you can search based on all these attributes, material attributes. Okay, you can search based on authorization group, unit of measure, material numbers, material group, material type. You can search, query your data using all these options. Okay, and you can also include your custom attributes as well over here. Okay, and you can also search based on the classification also, based on your class characteristics. So you can provide your class name. You can also add characteristics. Based on the characteristic values also you can search the materials. So you have all these kind of thing over here. So once you search your materials, you get the response over here based on the matching. Let me use HANA search. Yeah, okay. So you got the result over here. We'll talk about the search methods in when we are discussing about the search application. Basically, to give an idea, which search technique you wanted to use. You wanted to search based on HANA, or you wanted to search based on the truck search or enterprise search, or else you have different type of search methods. Okay, so we'll discuss in detail later. But based on that one, once you search your data, and again here you have an option to create a new material, or you have an option to copy this existing material, or you can select multiple materials from here, and you can initiate a mass change. This is also one way of performing mass operations. You can look at the change documents, change history of these materials. You can look at the replication status of these materials, and you can also replicate the data from here, ad hoc replications. So basically you can perform almost everything from here for your material master object. Okay, so along with this one, you also have other uh, uh, your mass for the links or the tools or applications for to perform to support your mass activities, and you will have your change history and your inbox, and you will have the analytical reports. It also they provided the links, and you will have the applications to support your replication activities, data replication activities, and to perform your bulk loads into the system. Okay, so all these things individually also provided over here in the left hand side panel, where you can actually search, create, change, mark for delete, or you can perform the mass operations. You can look at the change documents, you can look at your analytical reports, and this is your data replication related config replications and data transfers. So pretty much you'll have all those links over here. Okay, now what happens is depends on the business, the user role, we hide some links, we restrict the required authorizations over here, but this is a complete exhaustive list that usually SAP provides. Now from here we copy this role and create a custom role. There we remove unnecessarily links for a requester role, and for approver role we'll add the required ones. So we'll play around with this homepage, but this is the starting or a base for us to perform any activities. Okay, similarly if I go for the finance or anything, I'll have the similar kind of home pages, and we can also build home pages like this for our custom objects as well. Okay, so any questions so far? Is this clear?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. Now let's have a quick look on one of the workflow process, how it look like. Okay, before getting into our data model topic. Okay, so I just created one simple custom object for I'm just trying something and I just created. So this is a custom object. Okay, similarly how you have seen that for the material business partner, the creation screen, right? Similarly, this is my custom object. So I'm just creating one custom object. This is, I call it as a QR kind of thing. Okay, so I'm creating one material over here. Basically, I'm creating the S screw. Okay, 201. This is my material number. I'm giving some material group. This is my okay, material group, and I'm just entering my the industry. It's an engineering one. Okay, so I'm just creating a simple material here. Okay, so let me enter some mandatory information over here. Okay, after this I'm at a requester step. So this workflow I configured like this. I'll draw this now. Okay, so I'm at a requester step. Okay, and as a requester step I entered some data, and I maintained some data. Then once I hit the submit button, it goes to approver. Now approver will have two options. Approver can finalize. I mean, these are the names of the buttons that we provide. Finalize changes, or else probably reject. So the name is different, but the thing is ultimately whether he will convey his action by clicking either of these two buttons. Once he completes his action, it goes to again approver 2, and approver 2 will have an action like activate or some, I will give some button name, and or else approver 2 also can reject this request. He also can reject this request. Okay, once approver 2 approves, okay, then this is the time in the backend I will initiate the activation step, and the data will get created and the workflow will be completed. Workflow will be completed over here. Okay, so now from the end user point of view, you can only notice I'm at the requester step or approver step and this one. But once this is the where user will take an action, this is the final step where user will take action from his side. After that, rest everything is a background process that we are going to trigger through workflows. Okay, now just look at this, how it look like. Okay, so as a requester, I entered some data. Now I can submit my request. So once I submit my request, in this workflow, what I have done is it goes to the next level and my name assigned at the next level also. So that means I'm acting as a requester, I'm acting as the approver one, I'm acting as the approver two. So now because the requester is submitted, it comes to the approver one. Okay, when I do a refresh on this one, now see here, now I got these two options. Now I'm at approver stage. This request is at the approver stage. Requester's thing is done. Now I'm at the approver stage. You can also look at the workflow log also at the top. You can see the workflow log. When you click this workflow log, okay, it shows that, okay, now it is pending at this is the approver name. It is pending at this particular person and it is ready for him to take an action. Okay, now came to me. Okay, so now as an approver, I have these three options. So these are the actions that we can provide during the workflow. I mean, when you are designing the workflows, we will discuss about these actions. But now I reviewed this data. This data looks fine to me. So I wanted to say that from my side, I wanted to approve. To approve this, I have this option, finalize processing. So I'm finalizing from my side. So I'll click this particular button. Now here, what happens is this particular step is done and this is done. Now it will go to this particular person to approve this request. So when I do a refresh, it came to me. Now we are at this particular stage. Now we are at this particular stage. Okay, so you can see as an approver too, I have got these two options. I can also look at the notes actually. If the previous approver or previous person maintained the persons, I mean, they can maintain some notes so that as a text for that next persons for approval note or anything, and you can also add some attachments so that to support this particular material creation or change process or anything. Okay, so we will go to all these details in detail. Okay, now at the approver 2, I can also look at the workflow log. If I click this particular button, it will show me that, okay, so approver 1 is already approved. So his action is completed, and what action he has taken, it shows me. He actually finalized that process. Now it is pending at approver 2. Approver 2 also, it's a my name, right? So that's why it is showing my name. Now it is ready with me to take an action. Okay, so I can look at these workflow logs. After that, once now approver 2 is the last step. Okay, so once approver 2 approves this request, okay, so that means, okay, here once if I approve this request, so this is the time what happens, that record will get activated. So in the workflow, we will, after this step, we will have an activation step. We call that as an activation process, and that process will get triggered and the record will get created in the backend ERP table. So this particular creation process is done now. Now this material creation process is done. Okay, I can also look at okay, I can also look at, yeah, just for it to hold for 2 minutes. Okay, so if I go to my change request, so this is the request that I just created it today, and the status is it is final check approved. It's already approved, this request. And what is the material number I created? Screw 201.
Akshay, I just have one question.
Yep.
So let's say I'm approver 1, you're approver 2, right?
Yes.
So if I approve and then you do the final approval, it'll only show your name, or it'll also show my name?
Where?
In the my change request, the screen that we're on right now, it'll show your name as.
Yeah, it will show that always it shows that who actually, just give me 1 minute.
Sure. Okay.
So you can see here the request always created created by person and finalized by person. Okay, created by and finalized by. Intermediate approvers you don't see over here. For that one, you need to go to this workflow log.
Okay. So in the workflow log, it'll show intermediate also.
Yes, yes,
Is
yes.
that correct?
You see now, if I go to this workflow log, right, it will show that approver one, what is his action, and if I go to you can see approver two, both actions are completed.
I just have a question with the audit trial. So if there's an audit trial that's conducted,
Yes.
it'll show the intermediate as well as the final approver, or it'll show only the final
So
approver?
audit trials, what actually audit trials it contains is the person actually who approved that particular the request, and it also shows these workflows and everything over there. So it gives that change request numbers. We will discuss the change request concept a little later. So it gives you all information: who are the approvers, what is the old value, what value he changed, everything, right from requester, intermediate approvers, and final approver information. Everything will be available there.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay. So, any other questions?
Okay, just a question, okay, regarding the parallel approval. Okay, suppose on the level 1, okay, so now you have only one approver. Okay, if suppose like 2 approver or 3 approver, okay, so in that case, how it will approve, and
No,
who
we
will be
will
the like?
see. I'll show you the parallel workflows when we reach to the parallel workflow topic. There we will discuss in detail about the parallel workflows, sequential workflows, and everything.
Okay, okay.